finding the horizon again in your life because you've come to that ground. This pilgrim ability of human beings to be on a certain piece of ground and yet holding this far, almost invisible horizon at the same time is really quite remarkable. Yeah. We are actually conversational beings. Yeah. We're never meant to choose one thing or another. We're always walking the path between what we think is ourself and what we think lies beyond us at the same time. Yeah.
And the more open, the deeper the conversation.
There's a great line by Antonio Machado, the Spanish poet, and if you ever want a free glass of wine in Madrid, you shout these lines out in broken Spanish. And they're, caminante no hay camino, se hace camino al andar se hace al camino. Pathmaker, there is no path. You make the path by walking. By walking, you make the path. So mathematicians, and physicists today would call that the iterative nature of reality, the way that just the way you're shaping the journey actually shapes your arrival at the same time. And one of the abiding dynamics of the pilgrim journey is the way, as you close in on the supposed target, on the supposed arrival place, on the ambition, it begins to change in quite fearful ways. Yeah? And who would you be if you actually arrived? Who would you be if you actually achieved what your whole life had been dedicated to until that moment? And this is a moment where human beings will often sabotage themselves, sabotage the goal, because the idea of reaching the place leads to another kind of disappearance. Yeah.
Your style of poetry, you've always been able to weave a number of different forms into your work. You include philosophy and theology and business. You've been able to work in many, many different arenas.
Yes, it could be that it's my practical Yorkshire inheritance, combined with my mother's lyrical Ireland. I don't know, it could be. And I do remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, growing up in Yorkshire, but also with this invisible Irish inheritance from my mother, where you're descended from the ancient kings of Hibernia, And I do remember saying to myself that I wasn't supposed to choose between those two worlds. The absolute practicality of Yorkshire and the groundedness of Yorkshire and this ability for imaginative flight. And so I've always tried to bring things together. Even the name of my enterprise that I formed to publish CDs and books is called Many Rivers. It's named after the rivers of the Puget Sound, all coming down into this gorgeous cradle, of water. My work is bringing different constituencies together. And at the moment, it's bringing a kind of worldwide constituency of inquiry. It's astonishing, on Facebook or in the places I go around the world, how fertile the ground is for these courageous conversations that I'm attempting to clarify, and elucidate for people through poetry and philosophy and storytelling.
I saw you opening up your newest book. I wonder if you would do us the honor of perhaps reading something from it.
I might indeed. One of the dynamics that I'm speaking to in this book, it's called The Sea in You, 20 poems of requited and unrequited love. Whenever you have a requited experience, you always get an unrequited one as a free bonus.
It's true.
And so you have to tell which are which. But there's a whole series of poems at the end about being in love with places, actually. And there's a series that extends an earlier series of poems about places I know in Ireland. And one of my favourite places is a place called Thoba Fodric, which means the Well of Patrick in Irish. It's on this glorious mountainside, this limestone mountainside overlooking Galway Bay, and then across the other side to this great expanse of Connemara. And it's a holy well. It's a place where people have gone for centuries or even thousands of years for healing. But just beneath that holy well, there is a plinth of rock into which has been gathered all of this archaeological miscellanea, including this astonishing carved face, which has just been cemented into this plinth. And the amazing thing about this face is it could be, this being Ireland, it could be 500 years old. It's more likely at least 1,000 years old. It could be 1,500 or 2,000 years old, actually. And it's just out there in the weather being worn away. It's limestone, so it's actually probably worn more now than when I saw it just even 20 years ago for the first time. But I remember the first time I saw that face, I knew she was trying to tell me something, because I always felt it was a she. I felt this shock of needing to listen and pay attention, but I couldn't figure out what it was she was saying to me, in a metaphorical or even a practical sense. But every year when I went up there, I'd go to the well, and then I'd go down and pay my respects to this face, and I'd ask the question, what are you trying to tell me? And then there were a good few years where I lost the question altogether, and I was just happy not to know. And I'd stand there. And then I got a hold of myself and said, David, keep asking the beautiful question. She does have something to say to you. So this went on for almost 20 years, and it was only last December I was in Connemara, and I was working on a little film with a cinematographer there, and during the middle of the week, I had a real breakthrough looking into the camera lens. It's a different form of conversational intimacy to be able to have a proper conversation with the camera. And I felt like I'd never been able to do it until that week. And suddenly I had this breakthrough. Well, at the end of the week, we went round to Thobafodric, to the Well of Patrick. And I said to the cinematographer, after we'd shot a little film, I said, let's go down. I'll show you this face. It's really quite incredible. So she went down, and being a filmmaker, she knelt down in front of the face with her camera lens close up. And it was just as if I was the face looking into the camera lens, as I had been all week. And I suddenly knew exactly what she'd been trying to tell me for 20 years. So this is the piece. It's called Stone. The face in the stone is a mirror looking into you. You have gazed into the moving waters. You have seen the slow light in the sky above Loch Ina. Beneath you, streams have flowed and rivers of earth have moved beneath your feet. But you have never looked into the immovability of stone like this. The way it holds you, gives you not a way forward, but a doorway in. Staunch as your need to leave, becomes faithful by going nowhere. Something that wants you to stay here and look back, be weathered by what comes to you, like the way you too have travelled from so far away to be here. Once reluctant, and now as solid, and as here, and as willing to be touched, as everything you have found.
That's beautiful. I'm glad you went back and asked that question. How many questions do we leave and don't come back to?
Well, exactly. And of course, there are some questions which are other people's questions. They get fired into our bodies by our society, our teachers. But finding out the questions that are yours, and that you need to be faithful to. I think this is one of the great human disciplines.
What inspired this book?
Well, a series of requited and unrequited experiences of love, and the whole tidal nature of, all of the imagery and the love poems in the book, requited or unrequited, has to do with the sea and the moon, the way things are given to you and taken away. The way you try to hold on to things, or sail a certain line across the ocean, and the way you're blown this way and that, and the way that love is constantly asking you to be a more generous version of the person you thought you were when you first stepped into the relationship. And it's a discipline of generosity, actually, and giving the other person away, giving your own conceits and ideas about who this person is for you or was for you. Yes. And, so it's the great test, and it's very physical. And so it's a representation of physical incarnation. And that's the old theological way of just saying being here. And I often think that the great shock of coming awake in life is to realize that half of your experience in life is mediated through grief and loss. Only half is mediated through being given and through growing and getting larger. But half of your life, at any point in your life, has to do with giving things away, and of letting things die, including versions of yourself. And so as we grow through the decades of our existence, we can't quite believe that we're involved with so much loss. We lose people. We all we all will say goodbye to everyone we know. Either they will say goodbye to you or you will say goodbye to them. So there's a part of us, as we go through these traumas, that says, you know, God, if this is the way the game is played, I'm not going to play the game. I'm actually not going to be here. I'm going to abstract myself out of my physical body, out of my voice, out of my desires and my longings, out of my own beautiful questions, and I'm going to create an abstract where I don't feel in the same way. It's more like a insulated numbness which prevents me from feeling, And I'm going to stay behind this rampart, this defensive system, and not appear again so that I can't be hurt in the same way. So part of coming to life again is the courage to be vulnerable, and that's what's in the face in the stone was trying to tell me. This face that's been there for thousands of years, willing to let itself be worn away by the elements, and to be here. That stone came into incarnation just as we did. It was stardust at one time, floating around in the universe, and was compacted by forces beyond itself. Just as we have been concentrated by forces beyond ourselves into a particular human life.
I'm thinking about your new book and the other books that you look back over time. Do you have any favorites, or are they all favorites?
They're all favorites, but I have particular favorites. And of those favorites, one is The House of Belonging. And I wrote that book out of a very pure space, and you could say a very pure, robustly vulnerable place. It was the time just after the end of my first marriage when I was making a home for myself and for my young son in this old farmhouse. And one of the remarkable things about making your home, if it feels like your home, is it doesn't matter how small or large it is. If it's your new home, it has endless horizons. And that's how that little farmhouse felt for me. So I wrote The House of Belonging out of that letting go of a previous life and coming awake in the new one. I awoke this morning in the gold light, turning this way and that, thinking it was one day like any other. But the veil had gone from my darkened heart, and I thought it must have been the quiet candlelight that filled my room. It must have been the first easy rhythm with which I breathed myself to sleep. It must have been the prayer, I said, speaking to the otherness of the night. And I thought, this is the good day you could meet your love. This is the grey day someone close to you could die. This is the day you realize how easily the thread is broken between this world and the next. And I found myself sitting up in the quiet pathway of light, the tawny, close-grained cedar burning round me like fire, and all the angels of this housely heaven ascending through the first roof of light the sun had made. This is the quiet home in which I live. This is where I ask my friends to come. This is where I want to love all of the things it has taken me so long to learn to love. This is a temple of my adult aloneness, and I belong to that aloneness as I belong to my life. There is no house. There is no house. There is no house like the house of belonging.
That is one of my favorite books and favorite poems. Thank you for reading
Thank you.
that.
My pleasure.
As you can tell, I've got my older copy of it with all my favorite passages, and that was one of them. Can you tell us a little bit about John O'Donohue?
John O'Donohue, he is well known, of course. When I met him, he wasn't at all. And if I'm a poet-philosopher, he was a philosopher-poet. And a really remarkable being who had a bird of paradise vocabulary, just astonishing to listen to, in this broad, clear accent, But he was also a Catholic priest, and he was also one of the foremost experts on the philosopher Hegel, and had a PhD in German philosophy around Hegel, and one of the great exponents of a great Dominican mystic called Meister Eckhart. Add to this wild kind of charismatic personality. When he entered a room, it felt like the lights suddenly brightened, and he had a laugh that was absolutely contagious. So he was absolutely astonishing, really, both conversationally and socially and invitationally. He was a massive invitation for people to come out, from behind whatever barricade they were hiding and have a laugh, have a drink, have a good conversation, yeah? Have a deeper sense of their own birthright and the horizon to which they were going.